All right, well, kia ora koutou. Welcome to the next instalment of the Affordable Energy webinar series by Wellbeing Waikato. My name's Harvey Brooks and I'm joined today by my co-host Ernie Newman, and it's our enormous pleasure to have Qiulae Wong from the Opportunity Party joining us, and I'll give a more appropriate introduction to Qiulae in just a second. Ernie, I'll use you as my test guinea pig today. Can you just confirm you're looking at the first slide of my presentation, the blue slide?
I am indeed, yes.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. We're on a good roll. All right, just a few little housekeeping notes from me to start with. We are recording the webinar today, and the presentation, the recording of that will be put on our website within the next day or so. If you're not comfortable with your image being captured in that recording, please turn off your camera now so that your privacy is protected. In any event, unless you are speaking, please turn off your microphone as well, just so we don't have any background noise. Now, as I understand it, Q, you've indicated you're happy to take questions during the presentation today, which is absolutely fabulous. Thank you very, very much for agreeing to that. To make sure that we don't have people talking over each other, if you do have a question, can you please use the raise icon, which is about at 12 o'clock on your screen right now. It'll just put up a little hand. And then when we see that, either Qiulae or myself will acknowledge that you've got a question and take the question at the appropriate time. Right, just to perhaps state the obvious, but I think it's important that we do. It's fabulous to have Qiulae here today. You are our first official political candidate who has joined the series, and we're very, very grateful for that. But I will say that our hosting of Qiulae and the Opportunity Party is not an endorsement of the Opportunity Party, or in fact of any political party at all. We're an independent, neutral organisation looking to understand how things work and what makes a difference. If you would like to talk to Qiulae about anything except energy, then I'm sure you can go to their website and contact the team to do so afterwards. So we would just ask that you confine and focus your questions and comments to the matter of energy today. Right, so I've already introduced myself. As I said, it's a great pleasure to have Ernie Newman here today with me. Ernie's an independent competition expert and commentator. His name will be familiar to many of you in terms of his work in telecommunications and the food industry, both of which remain highly, highly relevant today. So Ernie will give some reflections at the end of Qiulae's presentation today. Just a little recap. If you're not familiar with Wellbeing Waikato, and forgive the repetition for those who are, we're an independent charitable trust focused on gathering regional intelligence about what's most important to households and whānau, identifying emerging risks early, surfacing underlying drivers, not just symptoms, convening government, iwi, councils and community organisations and the private sector around decision useful insights. And you can see some of our recent reports there at the bottom of the screen. And just last week, we released a report on social investment in New Zealand. There's a great deal of interest in this. There has been for about a decade now, but we found that it wasn't really clear or agreed amongst people exactly what it is. So we've released that report to try and clarify that a little bit more. I've just realized that I blew right past the karakia, so I'm just going to stop for a second and share a karakia to make sure our meeting is tika. He karakia. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tanga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga, haumi e hui e, taiki e. My apologies. Right, so that's available on our website now. You can have a look at it, and we're actually posting excerpts from it regularly on our LinkedIn page as well. So, what are we talking about today? Why does it matter? Well, as I'm sure we're all quite now well aware, because this really has become an election issue, energy systems in New Zealand or anywhere need to be affordable, reliable, and sustainable, or as the saying goes, the energy trilemma. And it's a case of trying to find ways of delivering energy which achieve all those three at once, or at least have reasonable trade-offs between them. The four big questions that we've asked all our guests, and Qiulae will reflect on as well today: how does the electricity system actually work, and why is it designed that way? What drives power prices, and how could they be made more affordable? How does energy affordability affect household and community well-being? And what would a better system look like, and how would we get there? So even though I've used the words electricity and energy somewhat interchangeably, we really are particularly talking about the electricity system today, but we're not confining Q or anyone in terms of what they want to talk about. Just a couple of reflections that I also made last week in terms of the sensitivity of our electricity system. Obviously things are a little bit colder at the moment, and you might have remembered on about the 5th of August we had a very cold, calm period where the spot price of electricity, which you can see on the left-hand diagram, shot up from very, very low levels to over $4,000 a kilowatt hour. It went down quickly again, but it just shows that we do have a sensitive system. On the right is a Transpower excursion notice from the same time when one of the generators at Huntly tripped and went offline. And so again, showing that the system is at risk of not necessarily fully providing any energy all the time. The other graphs, which I think really matter, on the left-hand side is the annual average energy prices from MB right back to 1975. Residential is blue, commercial is red, and industrial is green. You can see they have been rising up and down a little bit, but in the last 12 months, as has been well canvassed now, residential energy prices have risen something like 12%, and it is one of the biggest drivers of inflation and household bills in the country. On the right there is some data from Gareth Cartwright about energy hardship. And what we can see there is that something like 200,000 households in New Zealand cannot afford to keep their dwellings adequately warm. And in a country with such abundant, plentiful energy, that doesn't seem right, does it? So with that little background, it's my great pleasure to introduce Qiulae to the series today. Qiulae's roots are proudly in One Tree Hill in Auckland, Māngakiakia. After studying law and politics, she stepped into the world of human rights, disability inclusion, ethical fashion, climate and purpose-driven business. Throughout her career, Qiulae has built companies, scaled global movements, and supported major brands like Vivienne Westwood and Stella McCartney to shift towards sustainable business models. After a decade overseas, Qiulae returned home with husband Grant and her 2 daughters in 2022. That's when she stepped up to lead the B Corp movement in New Zealand, which is, I think, where I first met Qiulae, helping some of Aotearoa's most recognised businesses like Kiwibank and Sharesies to balance profit and purpose. From there, it was on to KPMG to support some of our largest corporations to tackle the transition to a low carbon future, as well as several volunteer and governance roles in the climate and purpose space. After a career standing up for a better business, Q is now leading a new generation of politicians to Wellington to stand up for the integrity and long-term thinking New Zealand needs now. So Q, it's a great pleasure to have you. I don't think there's anyone in New Zealand who doesn't know who you are these days, so well done on that. And I really do value your time. So kia ora, the floor is yours.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou, everybody. Yeah, thank you so much for having me along today. And yeah, it's a bit of a strange feeling to feel like everybody knows who I am. And I don't know if I'm quite that level yet, but yeah, certainly getting stopped in the street a little bit more, which is the work of a whole team behind me, not just me. But it's really great to be here. And this is a topic that means a lot to us as a party, and particularly for this election. We actually released our abundant energy policy back in February this year, before the fuel crisis hit, because when I stepped into this role in November, we're looking at the policy platform, and my background, as Harvey's mentioned, is in sustainable business. And so I went around and talked to lots of people that I knew and said, both in business and in community, to figure out what's really going to make the biggest change in people's lives over the next few years. And energy consistently came up from a cost of living issue and a cost of doing business issue, and a lowering our emissions perspective as well. So I think it achieves so many things, and it's literally the fuel for our economy. And so I think if we can get this right, it would make a significant difference to our how we all feel within the economy. And just a note on what you're doing at Wellbeing Waikato, throughout my career, I feel like I've increasingly zoomed out to the different systems that we live within, sort of starting out working with individual businesses on how do you operate more ethically and sustainably, to then working at whole industry levels, like in the fashion sector, and then looking at the sort of business-wide movement through B Corp, and then now in government. And so I think that this concept of shifting our economy to ensure well-being is a really important move that we need to make very soon, because simply designing our economy to deliver more stuff, to deliver more profit to shareholders, is not creating the outcomes that it should for everyday people and for our environment. So I really appreciate the work that you do here, and it's something that I'm personally really interested in, and essentially is why I'm here in this role. Before I get into the nuts and bolts of our policy, I will give a bit of a background on the Opportunity Party if people aren't too familiar, and then happy to go into that. And as Harvey says, if you've got any questions, feel free to pop up your hand. It looks like we're a relatively small group, so we can take questions throughout. So the Opportunity Party has been around for over 10 years now, or just around 10 years. So founded at the end of 2016. And we've always been really focused on the big economic settings that need to change to take New Zealand forward. Initially, that was really focused on tax. So Gareth Morgan, who founded the party, was involved in the tax working group that the government set up to look at how we can deliver a tax system which would be more productive. But it also, our policy platform expanded beyond that to look at other economic drivers and how we could make our economy fairer, deliver more prosperity for not just today, but for the next generation. And how do we shift our economic settings to the kind of future which is coming for us, things like climate change and technology. How do we embrace those things and make our economy work for more people? So philosophically, that's really where we come from. And I would say the things that really drive us are looking at the long term, taking a systemic view of the challenges ahead of us, and trying to find common ground, because we won't make really big economic changes unless the whole country gets behind it. And actually, one of the things I've really noticed getting around the country and talking to lots of different people is it's not just kind of the business and economy side of things, but this happens in education and health and justice as well. When we're really divided and we have this flip-flop between the left and the right, that is really what's slowing us down in so many different areas. And so while I came into this with a real focus on kind of that sustainable development angle, I think the biggest difference that we can make right now in New Zealand politics is to drive more unity and common ground in the way that we take that long-term view and plan to deliver some of the big changes that need to happen. So when that comes to energy, I think this is absolutely core to us making progress in this space. And if we kind of unpack the first question that you had there of the 4 questions, how does our electricity market actually work? Don't want to go into too much detail. I'm sure lots of you are familiar, but obviously we see the biggest problem being that spot price market, whereby we are paying the most, the price for the most expensive electricity used, being coal and gas at any given time. And also the problem being that we have a just-in-time market. So our generators will only ever build just enough capacity to meet the demand that's there. Because if we have too much capacity in the system, if we have too much wind or solar and it doesn't get used up, essentially that's wasted investment. It's not being sold. And so, they've put energy and resource into delivering it. If nobody's there to buy it, that's not a good thing for the business. So we've really come at this from trying to fix the market perspective. That's our primary objective. And it's also about bringing costs down, but we think fixing the market will achieve that objective. And that's why we are looking at both big grid scale solutions, as well as the more household level community resilience focus as well. And we've obviously seen with the fuel crisis this year, those peaks in fuel, but also in how we use electricity, we are very susceptible to that here in New Zealand. And how do we make sure that our communities are more resilient and have more control over their electricity supply and use in the long term? So if I speak to the market stuff, the big thing that we really want to introduce into the system is a capacity investment scheme. And so this is a contract for difference model, which exists in Australia and in some states in America. Essentially, it is the government guaranteeing a price for new generation. And that then gives generators some certainty to invest in the projects that will deliver that energy. At the moment, for example, if you speak to National, they'll probably say, well, we're fixing this by making consenting easier. But the reality is we actually have a whole bunch of consented renewable energy projects that are sitting there and waiting to be built because the gentailers wait until we've got that certainty of demand before they do it. So by providing the guarantee of a minimum price for new generation, we give that certainty to investors and businesses to get on and build those projects. The other part of it is ring fencing the Crown dividends. So the government takes around $500 million annually from the dividends from our gentailers. Currently, that just goes into a general tax pool. But we believe if we are going to be serious about electrification and renewable energy, then government should put that money where its mouth is and fund things that will drive up demand for renewable energy. So that's going into funding things like community level solar batteries, supporting households to implement solar, all those kind of electrifying our transport fleets. Our view is that $500 million could be agreed on kind of year after year in collaboration between government, industry and communities around what would be the most, the highest priority things to spend that money on to drive electrification in our economy. All of that we think needs to sit within a long-term energy strategy. And it seems like a no-brainer, and it would go without saying that we should have an energy strategy. So it's baffling that we don't have one as a country, particularly when we are going through this energy transition. If we don't know what our energy mix is going to look like by 2050 or what kind of capacity we're actually striving for, it becomes really difficult to know how many new projects we need, what kinds of projects we need, where in the country they should go. So that long-term energy strategy is critical, and it has to be cross-party. So that is one of the big things that we will push for. And if we could only get one thing from our policy, then I think the long-term energy strategy has to be it. I saw a question come in here. Is opportunity considering that its capacity or fixed price initiative could be accessed by local community energy-based projects too? Yes, so that's a great question. We've proposed actually limiting it to smaller providers and new entrants. So that could be both big and small, but particularly new entrants that don't own a whole bunch of generation at the moment to provide more competition into the market. Ultimately, we've proposed just having that initially, so it might be opened up to the gentailers down the line. But yeah, I think it's important to drive that competition into the market that way. I guess a note on breaking up the gentailers. I know that's been proposed by both the Greens and New Zealand First. We did look at it as an option, and we're not necessarily closed-minded to it. But when we looked at really the problem that we're trying to solve being that just-in-time market, if we break up the gentailers, you still have that challenge of not wanting to overbuild our renewable energy capacity. So you'd still need something to incentivize them to build more renewables. And that's why we've not included that in our policy. We would rather see these other things implemented. And then if there is a case still for the breakup of the gentailers because of a limit of competition, then we would be open to that as well. And I suppose linked to that, I know we're talking about energy policy today, but we have policies around competition and lobbying that would, I think, support that. So essentially there our policies are to strengthen the Commerce Commission, to have more independence and powers to take action on the recommendations that they make, because we have had a lot of market studies about many sectors, but not enough action. And then linked to that as well is lobbying. So clearer, transparent rules and a mandatory code of conduct around lobbying in New Zealand, and a stand down period for ministers, giving them a year cooling off period before they can step into a lobbying role. So I think all of that combined should do a great deal for energy security, abundance and affordability in New Zealand. And ultimately that's what that comes down to, is everyday people being able to access the abundant resources that we have. As you say, Harvey, it's crazy that we've seen such big spikes in our electricity prices when we are one of the most abundant, resource-rich countries in the world. And while we've got a high level of abundant resources going into our system, that hasn't really increased in the last decade or forever. Whereas you look at other countries around the world that have gone from 5% renewable energy in the mix up to 90% over the last couple of decades, and we should just be employing some of the tactics that they have, which is where we've taken a lot of the inspiration for our policy from. So I might leave it there in terms of policy overview. Happy to answer any questions. What was I was trying to think back to some of the 4 questions that you had put up.
Yeah, let me just, I don't want to hammer them too hard, Qiulae, because it's a matter of what matters to you, but how does the electricity system actually work? And as you said, we've actually had lots of people talking to us about that. I actually have 1 or 2 little questions about that for you as well. What drives power prices? How can they be made more affordable? How does energy affordability affect household and community well-being, and what would a better system look like? So I think you've certainly given us some strong pointers on the 4th, and we're not asking anybody to answer absolutely all of those questions, by the way. It's not reasonable to do that. But maybe just while maybe people are thinking a little, what's interesting me as a relative newcomer to the system as well, and it strikes me as a system that almost nobody can completely understand, is we, as a first world country, apparently, we all have a reasonable expectation that if I turn the switch on the wall, something will happen any time of the day or night. And in the system, in order to do that, you need to make sure that when there are those times of peak demand, which tend to be in the wintertime when it's cold, that the system will still work. And I remember, one of the sort of poster style advertisements that the Opportunity Party had a couple of months ago sort of had an image of solar and wind and an image of LNG, of the LNG terminal and LNG ship. And obviously, and I'm not necessarily advocating for the LNG solution at all, but I think what that's about is how do we deal with this peak demand? How do we make sure that the system remains reliable when we absolutely need it to be? And the slight challenge with wind and solar is that it's intermittent, and we tend to, in New Zealand, we tend to have peak demand right when there's actually not much sunshine, and our lowest winds tend to be in the winter as well. So from Opportunity's point of view, can you talk to me a little bit about that mix and how you give that certainty of supply?
Yeah, so I think some of it is reserving our hydro for when we do really need it, and if we have more solar on homes, then we will use less of that when it's not really peaking. And there's so many things that are interconnected as well. If we build better homes that require less electricity to heat them and everything, then we will have less of that peaking. And obviously things like vehicle to grid, more control over energy demand in the home, smart meters and things like that. That requires sort of one part of the policy I didn't talk about was the EDBs, the electricity distribution businesses, the lines companies. And we've proposed not a merger, but a consolidation of their efforts. So not necessarily getting rid of them and the individual entities, but forcing collaboration on a few key things, particularly around data and innovation. Because if we want to update, modernize the way that our electricity system works so that there is more peer-to-peer sharing, then we need to make investments in how those local networks work. And so they need to work together, otherwise we just end up with duplication of efforts. And those things are not cheap to invest in. So we'd like to see that reduced from the 29 that we have now to around 6 to 8 bigger entities that are collaborating on those projects. And on the homes front as well, I think that this is a real untapped kind of opportunity, excuse the pun, for New Zealand. Just yesterday, I was visiting what's called a super home in Christchurch. It's a bit like a passive house or, a Green Star house. And the electricity bills on those homes are minuscule compared to the average house in New Zealand that's built to the building code usually, but because our standards are so low in the building code, our homes are very drafty and leaky, and therefore we spend a whole lot of money heating them. And so if we can make warmer, drier homes the norm, both to build and buy and rent, then I think there will be less impact on the grid as well.
That's awesome. Qiulae, you might hear this is quite unbelievable. We've got a fire alarm.
Oh, no, I can't hear
it. Ernie's got a question. Ernie, I have to evacuate the building. Could I ask you to ask your question and then facilitate the rest of the webinar? I might be back in 1 minute or not. I'm very sorry.
You look after number one, Harvey. Thanks. Okay, Q. I'm very fixated on the issue of lobbyists and the endemic. I hesitate to quite use the word corruption, but it's getting towards that point. Having said that, I'm conscious that I can be accused of having been a lobbyist for much of my career. So can Harvey, and so I suspect can you. So lobbying in itself is not necessarily a sin, but where we have come to grief in New Zealand is that the big business lobby has got out of proportion to other influences within the New Zealand economy. And so the interests of small to medium enterprises, the interests of consumers, the societal interests have got completely swamped by the sheer weight and the force of the lobbyists for big business, who can be in-house or who can be external operators. So I would like to just emphasize with you one thing and then ask you a question. The point of emphasis is that none of this will work unless you get your lobbying policies front, left and centre right from day one. That's the most important problem that the incoming Parliament needs to resolve. And if you don't get that fixed, then that failure will actually frustrate whatever other policies you want to put in place. And number two, and this is a bit of a direct question because of that linkage, but do you feel under any pressure to soften down those policies, or do you feel that there is an acceptance within the business community, the lobbying community, that the halcyon days perhaps are coming to a bit of an end?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We've only just released it on Sunday, so we have yet to. I haven't had too much pushback yet on the substance of the policy itself, but many people have warned us that it will come. But I think it's just so hard to argue with. Like, as you say, lobbying is a normal part of democracy, and depending on where you stand, there are good and bad lobbyists. There's big business lobbyists, there are environmental NGOs who are lobbying government for change, and that I think it's important to have that access to decision makers to put your case forward on these things, but it has to be transparent, and there need to be safeguards in place to prevent undue influence or too much access to ministers. And so that's why we've proposed things like the cooling off period, the transparent register of lobbyists, the mandated code of conduct, which says things like you can't take a fee for policy being enacted, where essentially you've got clients who are paying for legislation to get across the line. Stuff like that just, can't happen. And New Zealanders need to trust that that doesn't happen. So I agree with you. It is really critical to not just this policy, but many other planks of what we stand for and part of our policy manifesto. So I think it will be something we'll be pushing very hard for, whether it's Labour or National. And I think even maybe I have a rose-tinted view of most people, but I'd say that even the lobbyists themselves should want to be held to that higher standard, because if we erode trust further in New Zealand, that's a bad outcome for everyone. It's bad for business, it's bad for social cohesion. So the more transparency and trust we have in the system, the better businesses can do. So I think that there is a very strong argument for it to be implemented.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions at the moment, so I'll take the privilege of asking one more.
Go for it.
You've talked a lot about collaboration within Parliament and getting the all parts of Parliament together.
Yeah.
And I listen to that and I sort of smile in a slightly wry sort of way. And I mean, only this morning I was listening to national radio, which immediately compartmentalises me as a very boring person. But I was listening to the Minister of Finance and her Labour counterpart having a debate, and it's all about the debate. The focus is all about the policy differences. There's no great feeling there that, hey, we could get in a room together and sort out some stuff. What makes you think that the Opportunity Party can put a different slant on Parliament and bring an industry like electricity together so that it actually sees itself as part of a healthy society rather than being gripped in the sort of the confrontational model? What have you got that others haven't?
Potentially our leverage. So I think this comes down to how we will conduct ourselves as a potential kingmaker. It's not just about getting our policy ideas across the line. Obviously, there's lots in there in the energy policy that we want to see. But as I mentioned, that 25-year strategy, I think, is the most important thing. And so we would be using our leverage if we're in that negotiating position. Say we're speaking to National, say the price of our cooperation here is that you get around a table genuinely with Labour and the other parties ideally as well, but predominantly the big two ones, to come together and mutually agree a plan, not something that you come up with and then send to them for feedback. But that's the price of our cooperation, is you finding common ground. And if they refuse that, we can I guess make that public, and the voters can decide for themselves what kind of government they want. But we will certainly be using our leverage in that way. I think the other part is strengthening, like I've said with the Commerce Commission, strengthening some of those institutions which are expert-led, and taking we can't take all the decision-making power away from ministers. That's the point of government, is democracy, is that we vote people in and out based on what they do. But we can, I think people like the Infrastructure Commission, again, if you compare us to other countries, in other countries, they have a lot more independence and power to hold the government of the day accountable to the advice that they give. So if we commit to projects or we commit to a plan, those independent commissions should have a greater say in holding the government accountable. And so I think that's also how we get them to stick a bit more to those long-term plans.
Thank you. So Harvey, you're back. You appear to have escaped without injury. We've talked a bit about lobbying. We've talked a bit about why the Opportunity Party might be able to achieve a more collaborative Parliament where others haven't. So hand back over to you.
Well, thank you. And look, given my absence, and I do apologise, that was a genuine fire alarm.
Wow.
So I sat there. I sat there like a turtle for as long as I could before someone gave me the thumb and told me I had to move. And given that I've missed the last 5 or so minutes of conversation, I'm reluctant to sort of open my mouth too much and maybe go go backwards on it. So I won't really. Ernie, you've got the rako for the final comments. I'm happy to conclude the webinar now, unless anyone else has got any further questions or comments or observations they have for Qiulae. John.
Yeah. Thanks, Harvey, and thanks, Qiulae. I was actually just typing out a question that I thought I might as well ask it verbally. We've just been made aware this morning of a proposal out via MB to put all the electricity distribution businesses under ComCom's price quality regulation. Are you aware of that? And what does Opportunity think of that?
I haven't seen it, so I can't really comment in detail. I think that, yeah, I mean, those price regulation rules need updating as well. I think that they were designed for a time when you're investing predominantly in poles and wires, not the innovation that's required for the modern day system. So, yeah, I think those rules generally need review.
Thanks, John. Any other questions or comments at this stage? Okay, it doesn't look like it. Ernie, did you have a chance to give any sort of reflections, or is it a chance maybe to hand back to you now, just to help close the hui?
Yeah, I'm happy just to make a couple of closing observations. Thanks, Harvey. One is that the existence of the seminar did give me the incentive to read through the abundant energy policy, which is on the Opportunity website. I found it a very encouraging document, and it's quite honest about, there's a lot more work to be done beyond where that ends, but it certainly sounds to me like a good foundation for where to go. And most importantly, it does recognise that we have a serious problem on our hands here. Second observation, just having listened to the discussion this morning, the reforms of the electricity market, which I can remember back in the 1990s, I think it was, or 2000s, it, in my mind, in my personal opinion, was an abject failure. And for the simple reason that instead of incenting the provision of plenty, it actually incented the creation of scarcity. And that's what's at the fundamental problem of our market these days, that the incentive on the big participants is to create conditions of scarcity and then create moats around themselves, pull up the drawbridges and sit there and milk the proceeds. And of course, the government is totally complicit in that because they're getting a lot of the benefit. So somehow, though, whatever course you take, changing that incentive on the entire industry from managing scarcity to creating abundance has got to be the primary driver. Beyond that, and the comments I made before about the lobbying thing, please don't forget that. Very, very, very important, because if you get the lobbying balance right for electricity, you will do the same for the supermarkets, the same for the banks, and so on. And that is, in my view, the single most critical issue affecting the cost of living. So I have found that a very interesting presentation. And as I say, the main thing I've got out of it, to be honest, is the incentive to read the abundant energy policy. And I would commend everyone to do that, whether you are a supporter of the Opportunity Party or not, because it's well worth a read. Very much plain language, very common sense. So thanks for your time, Q, which I suspect is not exactly abundant at the moment. We really do appreciate you being part of this, and I'll hand back over to Harvey to close.
Awesome, Ernie. Thank you. And I just really want to reflect Ernie's comments, Q. It wouldn't matter whether you're an existing member of Parliament or an aspirant member of Parliament. I think anyone who knows a parliamentarian or a candidate knows that they probably don't sleep. And so for you to share the best part of an hour with us today, we really are honoured and very, very grateful, and have really enjoyed the observations and the thoughts and that you've put into it. In terms of where to from here, and hopefully, Q, this is of interest to you as well. I think we've got Overall, around about 16 speakers lined up through this series. And I'll just flick back to my slideshow to close off in terms of some of those thoughts. And the next one we've got is Paul Fugue and Jessica Wilson, pardon me, from Consumer and Power Switch next week. Consumer released a really good report about 2 or 3 weeks ago on electricity affordability. And I think it's really worth reading. There's a lot of alignment with what you were talking about too. I think they're much more in the Gene Taylor split up space, but they've got some good reasons for that as well. But what I really loved about the report, and it was something we talked about before the Hui started, Q, was that they have really focused on what is this like for real people? What's the struggle like if you actually can't pay the bill, or instead of buying food, you try to keep the lights on, those kind of things. And it's that humanity, which I think is so important in all of this, because we need to understand systems. But if we can't have empathy for people, then I think we're in a little bit of trouble. So Paul and Jessica, same time, same channel, this time next week. I hope you do join. The other upcoming speakers are there that you can see. I won't read them all out, but there's a lot of interesting speakers from a lot of different perspectives, including John, who we've got online today, and many others as well. The series finishes just before the election. What a coincidence. And the idea is that we will then produce a summary of the total 16 or so speakers in terms of what were the common messages, where are the areas of strong agreement, where are there outliers, where are there things to work on. Obviously, for anyone coming into Parliament in early November, that will probably be a little bit late, but we hope that as the new government, whichever government it is forming, then what we will produce at that time will be a useful resource for them to refer to as well, because we're talking about affordable energy in the Waikato, but let's be honest, it's affordable energy in New Zealand. If you're interested, anybody who is not aware of it, as I've probably already said way too many times, please just go to our website. All our presentations are there, and those who provided slides, we've captured all their slides with their permission as well, so you can go and actually reflect and review and have another look at that. So this recording will be online in just a couple of days' time. So that is pretty much our presentation for today. Once again, huge thanks to Qiulae for taking the time to be our guest speaker today. Thank you, Ernie, for saving me while I had to leave the room. Really appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing you all this time next week. I'll just close this with a karakia and then let you get on with your day. He karakia. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o te tātou ariki o ihu karaiti, me te araha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua, tapu ake ake. Āmene. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks, Q.